Cyberpunk 2077. I knew this was going to be a controversial launch. There was zero doubt in my mind that it wouldn't go without massive controversy. Almost a decade of hype and plenty of interested people created a perfect blend for it. But this is a review, so we're going to address those controversies and then set them aside to review this game objectively. Quite honestly, the trend is to hate and tear apart the game in order to cater to the loud group of angry people against this game. And while yes, there are warranted criticisms of the game, I believe most of it paints the game as a complete and unrecoverable disaster doomed for eternal disappointment. Articles ranging from how the story is nothing but a lazy game aimed towards big corporations and taking them down, all the way to showcasing lawsuits placed by investors. I will address the proper criticisms and also address the game with an open mind. I understand that there is a difference in terms of experience while playing on console versus PC. However, it doesn't change my mind on what I think of this game. Now, before we go into everything, this is a massive game with multiple facets and intricate details and a ton of content to go over. I personally can't go over all of it, but I will do my best to address what I believe is important to the game, the genre, and the audience. There's a ton of subtopics that can go into massive detail, but I'm going to try and wrap it into one cohesive video. I hope it pays off as I'm typing this script because this is incredibly daunting. Oh, and massive spoilers. So, you've been warned. Grab yourself a snack, beverage, and something comfy because we're going to be here for a while. So, let's get into this.
Oh, can you run and grab us a pizza?
Take out the food? No, just no.
The first and foremost thing to address is the controversy. A game like this is destined for a ton of hype in this day and age. Story-driven, single-player, massive open-world games are just hard to come by. The biggest titles that come to mind within the last decade to most people are GTA 5, Red Dead Redemption 2, and Skyrim. And with a game like Cyberpunk, it's hard not to draw comparisons between them even though they are different in many regards in respect to the individual studios that developed them. Bugs plagued the versions on last-gen consoles and caused absolute game-breaking havoc. Refunds on the PlayStation Store and being pulled all together have been coupled with threads, videos, and articles dedicated to showing and displaying the different bugs in the game. Now, to be fair to both parties, there is almost no game, no piece of software that is without bugs. There will always be bugs. However, it doesn't give an excuse to how broken the versions were on PS4 and Xbox One on release. These versions of the game should have definitely been delayed, as many have said before, but most likely the investors wanted to meet a financial quota before the holidays and not have to wait any further before a cash in. The PC version of this game was honestly fine and completely playable. I personally didn't receive many crashes myself, but there were some weird issues that caused me to restart the game every now and then. It actually went quite smoothly for a freshly launched game. It's just a shame that the console versions didn't have the same fate. A good amount of people went for the refund on PS4 and some stuck it out. Now, even though PlayStation pulled Cyberpunk out of their store, CD Projekt Red continued to provide updates to PC and the console versions regardless of the backlash and the closing time frame to Christmas Day. I saw a lot of comments on how CD Projekt Red was going to leave Cyberpunk in the state and toss it to the side for other projects. Ethically and from a business perspective, that makes no sense. They don't release games every year, and they sure wouldn't want to let this game go by the wayside because they wanted to make a quick buck on a game that almost took 10 years to develop. Moving forward, they are continuing to release patches and updates to the game that have been game-breaking, so they're pretty much on top of those bugs at least. There was a game save limit of 8 megabytes, which was a massive flaw in my eyes, and they patched that issue within a week. Bugs plagued Skyrim in the beginning, and there were plenty of weird bugs on release with GTA 5 as well, but again, I'm not trying to validate the bugs, but more importantly settle and even out expectations. But these bugs aren't the only pillar of controversy. False advertisement also riddled this game with backlash. A lot of people asked about wall running, life paths, more game mechanics, and features showcased in early on promotional material. Now, I can't address each and every individual claim from the marketing as that would take way too long. With the game development process taking this long, it is really difficult not to overshoot and plan out mechanics and gameplay you want to implement into the game, only to have it put on the chopping floor just to meet with deadlines and requirements. Marketing for a game 7 years in advance is really hard to do, and there's no way it wouldn't build up expectations to not be met. That's why I personally set a grounded expectation when approaching this game, no matter how excited I became. This happens with movies and other games all the time because it just leads leads to speculation and you just build up your own world inside your head only to not have it met. Doesn't excuse it in its entirety. I still believe the core of the marketing displayed what the game was going to be about without giving out too much information. A dark sci-fi action-adventure role-based single-player game with Keanu Reeves. While I do think there was a bit of disconnect between the trailers and the game we received, it certainly gave off the vibe that there was more of a GTA 5-ish game, but it was fundamentally different. This is just a tricky subject to tackle, and yes, there are things I wish were in the game that the trailers displayed that aren't here in its current state. However, there was a lot more to this game that the trailers didn't show as well. The only thing I ever refuse to defend is the absolute misleading pre-release reviews on the game that couldn't even show console footage. Absolutely anti-consumer, and in no way should any company do anything remotely like this with their product. This was probably the single point that pissed me off the most. But let's leave it at that and talk about cut content. It's obvious to tell where there were pieces of content left out to meet deadlines, or at least it seems as so. The life paths were one of the biggest ones. The life paths more or less serve as a 30-minute intro to the game to introduce the history and backstory of your character, and is less about a complete and different perspective offered by the chosen life path. I was personally disappointed by this, as it seemed to play a much bigger role in the marketing material. Honestly though, that would have taken so much longer to develop alongside the rest of the game, and I can understand it is the way it is. I'm not sure if this is something that can be updated in the game, as it would have to intertwine between everything else and make it seamlessly integrated into the story, which could require an entire rewrite. I'm not going to say it's impossible, I just wouldn't expect to see it further developed in the future. If anything, I would like to see a smoother transition into the main story, as you can go from a straight corpo worker to a street kid as character. It just really feels as though this game was meant to be played as a street kid. Another piece of cut content is a montage between you and Jack in the beginning. I really wish I got more time to spend with the big guy and have those one-on-one moments and missions to build a strong connection to the character. Regardless, I did feel connected to the character. I just would have been that much more invested before his ultimatum. Some other things left out were mechanics like the train system and so on that would add some extra layers to the city, but I believe that can be added into the game in future updates. This leads me to my last pillar of controversy, the complaint that this is not an RPG. But it is an RPG. Let me explain. Let's first look at the definition of what it is. I'm going to use Wikipedia as the reference for this one, as many other resources share similar sentiments towards the definition. A role-playing game is a game in which players assume the roles of characters in a fictional setting. Players take responsibility for acting out these roles within a narrative, either through literal acting or through a process of structured decision-making. There are plenty of different roles to play into this game and play styles. Want to play a gun-toting killing machine, a melee skull-crushing, flesh-cutting aerial maniac, or maybe a hacking, undetected, stealthy whisper. The game supports these different playstyles and can match the portion of the role you want to play, not only in the game mechanics but dialogue decisions as well. The ending of the game has 6 different conclusions. While the main story is mostly going to follow the same beats, there are a few decisions that can change things, like saving my chum, Takemura. If you end up saving Takemura, you'll open up another version of one of those endings. If you don't choose the ending with Takemura and you save him, he'll end up killing himself. Those are some heavyweight decisions just dealing with one character. In the bigger side quests in the game, you can have things go down in various ways to continue on with your relationships and storylines with other characters. This all depends on your decisions. They may not be cut and dry like save person X or save person Y, but more nuanced as a consequence of your decision and what you do or say. Another aspect a lot of people get hung up on is character customization. Character customization isn't as good as some of the titles in the Fallout portfolio or in Skyrim, but it's available here even with its customization gimmicks like Big Penis. While I do wish there were more features to change to my heart's content, it does a solid job to offer a lot of different looks. GTA 5's main story did not even offer any character customization. There's plenty of side quests and missions within the game to go beyond the story and adventure on your own path within the game. Even side quests that aren't even official side quests. All of this in conjunction, I believe, solidifies the RPG definition attributed to the game. So that's it. As far as looking at the controversies of this game and addressing them, there's always more detail to go into. But I want to make it clear that this review isn't about changing your opinion, it's just about voicing mine. Whether or not you find it unjust, so be it, but this is my independent opinion. You can agree or disagree with it, but let's move on to the core of the review. So I have about 162 hours into the game at the time of writing this review, and there's plenty more time I can spend in-game and more ways and styles to play that I just simply won't have time to do in order to get the review out in a reasonable time. But after this many hours of gameplay, this is what I can say about the game. Also, with some help from outside sources like Low Sodium Cyberpunk on what they observed as well. The first thing I want to review is the performance of this game. We already addressed the bugs and the constant crashing on the initial release on the console versions, but I'm going to talk about playing on the PC version in this scenario. Not everyone has a high-end PC or even the availability to buy parts for one, but some of these performance attributes may trickle down to the console versions as well. The overall game is incredibly taxing, especially in Night City. NPCs walking around, tons of light sources, cars and aerial vehicles above, and textures on textures for all the buildings and the cluster in between all of it. It's a lot going on and it taxes your hardware pretty well. Right now I'm running on a 9900K with the GTX 1080 Ti. While the parts are several years old, they still offer quite a bit of power to this day. This game really excels with the graphics cards of the RTX lineup that can utilize DLSS to play at a lower resolution, but display an upscaled version to the resolution of your monitor to get a lot more FPS. It comes in really handy here. I hope to see more performance optimization improvements over time, even though we are getting them periodically. I remember when GTA 5 came out on PC, it was a decently difficult game to run at high resolutions and maintain textures and quality. However, this game looks really good, even at medium or lower graphic settings or resolutions. It maintains a good fidelity and respect to the lower settings. Regardless of the performance, I am very grateful for the fact you can change your graphic settings on the fly without restarting the game. This is awesome, and I hope to see this in more games in the future. Another thing to talk about is the load times. This game was certainly developed to be played on an SSD, but its performance on an HDD isn't bad either. I have mine on a SATA-based SSD and the load times are almost instant. It is incredible how well optimized the loading time and resource management is handled at such a scale of a game. Not to mention, there is no loading once you're finally loaded into the game. It's quite seamless and well optimized, and I am very impressed in that regard. That's the most technical this review is going to get in terms of hardware, so let's move on to the look of the game and the animation quality. Oh my, the visuals in this game are quite honestly insane. It looks better than the demo in 2018, but I was honestly blown away at how good this game looks. Of course, your mileage may vary with what kind of hardware you're working with, but this is some of the best in the business. Ray tracing is put to good use in this game. It works incredibly effectively. You can see light shining on the face through different hair strands, all sorts of things. Unfortunately, I don't have the horsepower to run such visual treats for my eyeballs, but this game does a fantastic job of emulating ray tracing, if you don't have ray tracing capabilities, that is. Actually, scratch that. I went out and bought a 3090, so not the best financial decision, but here we are. Some of the footage in here will be mixed between the 1080 Ti and the 3090. Both look great. Anyways, lighting on the skin looks amazing. The way shadows are cast and diffused and rolls off in certain areas really adds the realistic effect to everything. And the way lighting can peak, reflect, and diffuse on different objects is really something to marvel and create a great level of visual immersion. The subsurface scattering is also fantastic. Skin textures and the platelets on the skin of the characters are visible on close-ups and really show a sense of realism to the character models that I can just stare at all day. The only quote-unquote bad visual effects are vehicles at a distance. They just look like the same car floating down the highway in the same position. GTA 5 had a much better render-in system that pulled off the distant traffic look. However, this is minor and should be fixable. Sometimes the city at a distance doesn't fully render in background buildings, and this might be because of my graphical settings, but they're mostly on high, so most of the time it's fine, but other times the further buildings have blob-like textures. Beyond that, we have textures and surfaces that look amazing throughout Night City that really creates the atmosphere that you are indeed in a city. The concrete, the spray paint, the junk on the ground are all examples. The giant landfill outside the city is comprised of individual objects. Usually it's just shapes with the garbage applied as a texture. It's insane. On the flip side, there are some texture loading issues even on PC, and this is prevalent in most games anyways, but I haven't came across this issue too many times. The interior on the vehicles are so well detailed that it's hard to believe that these aren't real cars. The stitching, the knobs, buttons, fabrics, and materials are just so well put together and detailed that I just want to sit in the car and admire the art that went into them. It's just a shame I don't enjoy the driving mechanics, but we'll get into that in a bit. The main character models are so well detailed that they are distinctively unique and look like a real person just based on their appearance. The scar on Panam's lip and cheek create the assumption that she's been in a few fights, and details as subtle as that can show what kind of history she has and what it says about the character. Judy has a mind flayer tattoo that correlates to her primary interest in brain dances and toying with the mind of emotions in individuals. The list goes on, and you can find a lot more of these kinds of details on the subreddit Low Sodium Cyberpunk. Also, look at the eyes on the character. You can see the individual veins if you're close enough. The level of precision and detail is unlike anything I've ever seen in a video game. The other thing is the quality of animation. There are a lot of points to cover when discussing animation, and yes, of course, there are glitches here and there, like the T-pose of pure dominance and some clipping as well. But for the most part, it's actually really good. The only animation that I believe needs work besides the occasional bug is when NPCs are driving. The car will be turning around the bend and the NPC has their hands straight on the wheel. There's some minor side-to-side adjustments like realistic driving, but the lack of a turning animation when the car is turning is just a bit wacky at times. Now onto the flip side. Let's look at the suspension underneath the car. It lifts and lowers the control arm underneath as it rides over bumps. A separately animated suspension is an insane level of detail, and I didn't even notice this until someone posted it on Reddit actually. The gunplay and weapon animation are all well done with reloading, recoil, and releasing gases and so on. Some of this of course has to tie in with the physics of the game as well, but it just looks really good. By far the most impressive animation is done with the characters. Look at how Jackie's collar on his jacket moves when his head is moving, or the creases in his jacket as well. Hair is also really well done here as it sways back and forth with head movement. Your own character has decent animations with interacting with the environment, hopping onto surfaces, using your hands, eating, drinking, and so forth. Even when objects intersect, they're really well done with little clipping and small enough distances between the objects to sell the effect that they are interacting with one another. Interaction and intersection with objects is an immense task to cover, and it's done pretty well here. Of course, there are times when it doesn't work well, but for the most part it does in my experience. The last thing to talk about is facial expressions. It's on another level for in-game animation, and it's not a pre-rendered cutscene. It is insane how the eye movements follow and interact with you and the environment, and facial expressions to match. I'll tell you what, I have never been so engaged into game dialogue before. It really brings a level of immersion with the characters, like you're actually talking to someone. It's a bit of a strange feeling knowing that it's fake, and my brain is trying to make the argument that there isn't someone trapped behind the pixels of my monitor. We can thank this facial animation to Jolly, which uses AI for live render techniques to capture and create facial and mouth movement. It's not as fluid and advanced as motion capture, which it shouldn't be, as that would require too many resources and compute power to do, but for a live render in-game facial animation, it's pretty damn impressive. Of course, other NPCs don't have the same level of attention or detail, but they all remain at a baseline no matter who you interact with. The other thing is when you look into a mirror or wherever there's a mirror involved in the game, the performance just drops like a brick. I'm sure it has to do something with the live rendering of custom details of your character, but this should definitely be optimized in the future. The other thing is the wacky animation of your shadow. It just looks freaky. The reality is the game isn't rendering your face or head, which looks like this if you were to see yourself in third person. Despite the terrible mirror performance and the weird character shadow casting that's just pure nightmare fuel, overall the visual fidelity of the game is outstanding and is certainly next gen for the coming years of gaming. The only issue is the hard performance hit it takes with everything taken into account, but with the years to come and with texture mods and better hardware availability, this game has a lot of potential to look photorealistic. Visual immersion is important, but so is sound design. The world of Cyberpunk can sell itself on atmosphere alone. The sound design is a big part of that. The guns sound amazing, and they're mostly distinct from one another. Take this slow pump action shotgun versus this semi-auto shotgun, for example. They are distinct from one another. They both give off a brooding sound of force, but in a different way. The slow pump action has a heavy, mechanical feel to it, something that seems like a Terminator would use. Slowly closing in on its enemies as the ominous sound of pumping a shell into the chamber followed by a deafening blast that's whispering your last goodbyes. It connects me to the action in the game, and I find myself giving excuses to getting into combat at every chance. The hacking sounds are well done and offer a crisp tonal note while flaring its 8-bit cyber sound signature to engross you into the cybernetic environment when engaging enemies. The sound of clothing rustling as you're just sitting at a bar, putting on the apparatus for a brain dance, or sitting in the Ripper Doc chair all really sell the small tidbits to engaging and interacting with the environment. The sound of the vehicles are very well done. The downshifts, the exhaust note, the crackles and burbles with some of the faster cars and bikes. It just sounds great. Sounds were recorded live, but the application of sound is equally as important. When you're sitting in a street market area, you hear the various people, advertisements, flying vehicles, sizzling food, radios, clinking of silverware, people eating, and it all comes together to sound like you're really in a city. Not just a couple random NPCs talking. It's a collection of those elements that really sell it. I really don't have any issues as far as the sound design goes. It's very important to a game, and I feel like they did an exceptional job here. It's one of the reasons why I really enjoyed the recent Modern Warfare, aside from its awesome gunplay. They did an excellent job at crafting the sound for that game. With the visuals and audible design, this game creates a fantastic atmosphere. This is probably one of the most atmospheric games I have played, if ever. Some other games that come to mind off the top of my head are Skyrim and the OG Gears of War. Those games really emulated the environment with tone, color grading, sound effects, dialogue, lore, and of course, visuals. Talking about the atmosphere of Cyberpunk can be a video of its own, honestly. There is so much minute detail in every sense of the way. Most games, you can often find the limits on the map where much attention wasn't paid to, but almost every corner of the city and map has incredible detail. The Night City NPCs can detract from the atmosphere, but a lot of that atmosphere is gained through the side quests and finer details, which I'll go into in a bit. Adding to the atmospheric level of Cyberpunk is the incredible music. The original soundtrack is absolutely amazing. The mixture of new age hardstyle undertones mixed in with guitars, cellos, and vocals really creates a beautiful blend of old and new. The music adds to the tense scenes or the absolute dread you're experiencing in the game. It adds a whole new layer just on the music alone. I cannot appreciate the music enough in this game.
You short circuit!
The radio tracks are fantastic as well, and all the artists that made music only for this game, very unique tones from one another, even if I don't like them. It just adds a wide range and diversity of flavor to your ears and really helps sell the idea that you are in the future in terms of music. Also, major shout out to the band Refused. They were responsible for curating the tracks for Johnny Silverhand. They captured the emotion of the character and the era of sound into their music very well. Absolutely well done. I've just been listening to the OST on repeat along with the song Major Crimes by Health. I cannot give enough praise to this music in the game. Alright, now let's talk about gameplay mechanics and the functionalities within the game. The gunplay honestly took me by surprise, and so did the katanas. I have a build right now that uses a combination of movement and slow motion perks, which make for some really fun gameplay. The guns have different recoil patterns and they all sound really good. You can get perks that allow you to reload faster and also do it while sprinting or vaulting, making for some John Wick style of combat. It gets really fun, but I like to mix in katanas as well. You have to get pretty close to enemies, but you can end up moving fast enough to slice and one-shot enemies once you get far enough into the game, which makes you feel like some out-of-world killing machine. I actively look for an excuse to find some bad guys and whip out the old comrade's hammer and katana. The action is fun, fluid, and most importantly, dynamic. You can really change it up and go from blasting to quick hacking to slicing, or not kill anyone at all. As much as I love the different styles of combat, my only criticism would be that the enemy types were lacking in some areas. Most gangs and factions you encounter mostly use ranged weapons. The variation I do appreciate are the animals that use melee and fists to combat you. The Voodoo Boys use ranged weapons as well, but usually have a netrunner hacking you if you engage in the combat long enough. However, the same could be usually said for the Maelstrom. Otherwise, the combat can get a bit repetitive in some regards, and some new enemies introduced into the game would help even that out. Customization is severely lacking after initial character creation. I would love to go back in and change the looks of my character if I'm not feeling it. I don't see myself often in third person, but the lack of changing hair or facial features or augmentation later on should be implemented. Not a huge deal breaker for me, but holds a decent weight in terms of criticism for me towards the game. There's also no car customization as well, which is sad, although I find the weapons and playstyle a lot more fun than vehicles, but still, I'd like to see more car mods in the future to make it your own. Same could be said with the choice of owning different properties. Yes, in the game you can get access to a few other properties, but nothing like choosing what you want to buy from a catalog of sorts. Looting can be tiresome in this game, however, I like the fact that loot items are color-coded in terms of rarity. This helps sort out common items from rare ones because there is a ton of stuff to loot in the game. When you're in the later stages of the game and don't need to vacuum every last pack of cards, ammo, guitar picks off the ground, it's nice to know where to focus your looting efforts. Exploration is top-notch. I know a lot of people were upset that there was no wall running, but a lot of the city can be traversed with double jump, and you can scale different buildings or rooftops and explore the city from new angles. It's not like the tops of buildings are bland texture maps either. There's attention to detail up there as well, with a few exceptions of course. For instance, on the top of the Afterlife bar you can find a legendary tech rifle. Not to mention there's various Easter eggs to other novelties in and outside of the genre, like Blade Runner, Terminator, Iron Man, Breaking Bad, Fight Club, The Matrix, and so on. There's archived conversations that are actually interesting and build details around the world you're in. The game is encouraging you to explore and find the city's secrets. For example, here's an unfinished highway that goes in between all the districts. I found some of the most amazing perspectives of the city from here. Your GPS won't take you through it since it's an unfinished road, so you have to actively find it. I love exploring in the city, and there's a lot to discover. I like the fact that not all the shops sell the same thing, especially when it comes to weapons, clothes, and cyberware. It encourages you to find them and see what unique items they can potentially hold. It makes this element feel real in a sense, and again encourages you to explore the game in the different shops to find different items. Throughout the game it may seem like it promotes forward entrance combat, but there's usually at least one other way to engage into combat if you need or want to use stealth. The same could be said for ability gated doors as well. Sometimes there is no other way into those rooms with goodies behind them, but I often find another way around to get into them. I'm always intrigued by the idea to investigate further to get where I want to. It makes the game feel much more open and freer to explore, even when there's blockades in your path. I see a lot of complaints about the perks in this game being useless, which is false. Have you introduced yourself to Cold Blood? Cold Blood, for example, activates after you kill an enemy and grants you different abilities for the duration of Cold Blood. If you open up the tree, you can increase crit damage, armor, movement speed, crit chance, and duration of Cold Blood. It can turn you into an absolute tank, or try going with the pistol perks and tech perks to get your pistols dealing insane amounts of damage per shot and completely ignoring armor. Same can be said with any weapon. Or perhaps go down the quick hack line and defeat hordes of enemies undetected and without laying a hand. Are there useless perks among the different perk trees? Absolutely, but they're also present in a lot of other perk-based games as well. There are a ton of playstyles to cater towards in this game. I personally went for crafting and Cold Blood to make ridiculous game-breaking weapons while having lunatic stats with Cold Blood activated. The only thing I would say is that stealth is hard in this game. Random enemies can just detect you out of nowhere. This can be annoying. but I've seen people get past these issues. For me personally, if I was to use stealth, I would combine it with firepower, so it would get me out of situations in case I got spotted, and I could use that firepower to get me back into a stealth mode if I was using a stealthy weapon of choice. One thing I would like to see is being able to redistribute your ability points. You can already redistribute your perk points, which is a great item to have, but the same should go with ability points so that you can go without having to start a whole new game in case you want to try a different build. But I guess that also encourages more playthroughs, so it's a 50-50. The crafting in the game is pretty good so far, however, it does need improvement. My biggest concern is just gaining crafting components without hoarding crap like a maniac. Also, for some reason, I get weird issues like not being able to craft my comrade's hammer after I've already crafted one before and have all the materials to make one. It just doesn't make any sense. I'd also like to bulk craft items as well. Perhaps the biggest thing for me is just being able to craft more clothes. I want to craft my own clothes without looking like a confused, tired, nighttime vendor, daytime casino manager. Which also brings up the issue with clothes being tied to stats, which in some ways can work and you can find some decent clothes with good stats, but I'd rather craft armor to go onto those clothes and be able to apply the mods onto them. I believe separating those facets would work better rather than tying them together. On the other hand, if I could just craft all my own clothing, then I would have no issue, but not everyone wants to go down the crafting route either. Game physics are fine for the most part, with bugs excluded of course. The driving dynamics however feel at the worst side of this. There's no feeling of direction really, and feels like the car is floating on the ground rather than a car tethered by gravity. I certainly prefer bikes over the other vehicles in terms of handling, and second place would have to go to the Nomad or off-road vehicles. However, a nice detail is that the off-road vehicles actually handle much better off-road than the street cars. Unlike GTA 5 where you can just drive up the mountainside and meme your way through in your sports car. Water physics are almost non-existent, but you rarely deal with water to begin with, so it's not that big of an issue for now. The UI is fine for the most part. I do like sorting options for your inventory and being able to go through the different categories as well, but I think those categories can also be broken down as well. For example, going into your weapons and having them filtered by tech weapons, assault weapons, and favorited items. I would really like to have a favorite items list to keep yourself from accidentally selling or disassembling an item that you really want to hold on to. I do appreciate the fact that you can store items in your vehicle though, so that does help. Another UI change I would like to see is to be able to organize save files by character. I would hope to have my one playthrough entirely separate from another one, but instead I have to remember distinctively which is which. It's fine for now, but I hope that they fix that in the future. Also, the minimap is quite literally a minimap. It's way too zoomed in. I'm used to it by now, but I'm constantly crashing into crowds of people missing my turn. A choice to zoom out would be great, or have a GPS projected onto the road would be pretty neat as well, and help sell that futuristic effect. The enemy AI definitely needs work. For the most part, it's fine, but enemies can be goofy and just get stuck or stop firing at you altogether for whatever reason. It's not horrible, it just needs to be ironed out. The police AI, on the other hand, is just pure nightmare fuel. These bastards just come out of nowhere and start wreaking havoc. This is a fixable issue, but there is no chase system right now with the police. Only a spawn in your ass system, so I hope to see that changed.
Exchanging fire!
Photo mode works really well in this game. I actually didn't know about it until much later in the game, which is a shame, but the photo mode can be really powerful, especially in the right lighting conditions. I highly recommend the IGCS mod to move the camera in a bunch more of ways. The camera mode seems to max out the graphical settings to give you the best picture possible, and I really admire that. Even with the photos taken while using a 1080 Ti compared fairly well to the photos taken while using a 3090 I have now. In my second playthrough of the game, I absolutely abused the photo mode. I hope to see more camera options and free movement control. I love all the character gestures that you can do as well. It works really well together. The last piece of gameplay that belongs in the world building of this game is just the NPCs. I remember in the marketing they mentioned each NPC would have their own basic routine, which is cool and all, but I don't see that here. A lot of the NPCs are copy and pasted down to the same walking behavior. It seems as though it was a quick fix to get the game out to give them similar behavior, but more in-depth NPCs would be a great polish to this game, and even some better dialogue options would be really neat. I also have wishful thinking here, but being able to engage and interact with these NPCs would be a really neat touch as well and gain a companion of sorts. It doesn't have to be that way, but something along those lines down the road would be awesome. It's wishful thinking, but I expect this game to have a long lifetime span of new content and updates to come. So one aspect I really do enjoy with NPCs is just seeing some of them have a legitimate conversation between each other at random points in the game. This element can be taken to another level to create better immersion, and this is a good step in that direction. Overall, I really enjoy the gameplay at the state that it's in right now. I only expect it to get better, at least with the AI. I love the different playstyles that this game caters to, and I love the way you can explore and parkour at some degree. In GTA, I always just wanted to drive around. In this game, I want to run and explore every piece of the city. I'm sure I left out plenty of gameplay mechanics, but these were the major ones that are the most important to me at this point. And I can only fit so much into one review. Now, time to get into the story. I'll go by saying this. This is with the assumption you've played the game or have a general idea of it. I do apologize if I start throwing names out there that I didn't fully introduce. I hope to make this as straightforward as possible. The game is ultimately about salvation. Everyone that was tied to V, performed the heist, and even after is more or less dead. Some of those in which V cared about. Yorinobu didn't put the chip in V's head or create any personal vendetta against V to begin with. Yorinobu's decisions were all made independently and isolated from V. The mission isn't to take down corpos, it's to save V by whatever means necessary. If it takes down Arasaka along with it, so be it. That's where Johnny's objective and V's objective can align, but even that can change.
The guy who saved my life.
V, you don't know how much I want that to be true.
The story places you into the body of V. You can either play as male V or female V. Both are equally badass with their voice acting chops. You have the life path options, as I mentioned earlier, to be a nomad, corpo, or street kid. They basically offer a 30-minute intro and give you some extra dialogue options. Regardless, for the sake of this review, we're going to go as male street kid V. The story overall is pretty short in terms of the main quest lines. If you play only the main quests, the story, the immersion, and the setting can seem a bit anemic. While I do think the story itself has enough going for it, I 100% think it should be played with some of the bigger side missions alongside of it. In either direction, I do wish the campaign was longer. With that said, I still love this story. At first, you're trying to make a big name in the city and get off the street, and with the wild turn of events, it all goes backwards, and you're fighting to stay alive. The first act of the story is mostly linear, but the rest of the game introduces some major decisions that can change the ending entirely. The set pieces are fantastic. Konpeki Plaza offers a fairly conservative main set piece to take place for the heist. However, the Arasaka Parade is probably one of my favorites in the game. The verticality, the jumping between platforms, the parade visuals itself was an entire vibe by itself. This really sets the atmosphere so well and offered a beautiful and fun quest that I will never forget. The pacing of the story is pretty good, a little fast paced in some areas, mostly in the beginning though. I really enjoy the slower parts and talking with characters, mostly because the writing is done so well. They're interesting, feel like real people in the ways they interact. They have real motivations. Not everything has to contribute to the story 100%. Sometimes I just want to hang back and talk for a minute.
Sometimes I wish to become a nomad, to leave this world, forget everything.
Granted, at every moment, you are dying rapidly, and that's why the pace is quicker, and the length of the story is shorter. There's also a good use of exposition through info shards, computers, and brain dances. The brain dances are a very unique way of storytelling and fit well for the narrative. It's not used much in the main story, and it doesn't have to. Otherwise, it would be too heavily relied on as an expositional device. However, brain dances are used a good amount in the side missions and used effectively there as well. The story also uses the technology lore pretty well, with rogue AIs like Alt, the Black Wall, the barrier between the rogue AIs and the net, Soul Killer, their extraction technology for ripping the consciousness out of someone, and Mikoshi, prison of personality constructs. So, addressing some of the larger decisions in the game, I'd like to name off a major one that deals with Takemura's fate. While he kidnapped Hanako, you have the choice to go back and save him. It's not laid out in a simple manner like save Takemura or don't save Takemura. You have to go back up the floors to rescue him from the ambush while Johnny initially tries to persuade you otherwise. Saving Takemura is a great feeling. However, if you don't go with him in the ending of the story, he will kill himself knowing he did not fulfill his redemption for Saburo. So, I left him there to die, knowing I wouldn't choose the ending involving him. I'd rather him die at the thought of him fighting for what he believes in, rather than by his own decision upon failing to carry out his sole purpose of fighting. It was a heavy decision I hated making, but I had to make it. Again, losing someone close to V. The tone, the music, the lore, and the characters are really well executed to make interesting character arcs and garner substantial emotions from the player, at least in my experience. I felt a wide range of emotions and was pleasantly surprised with the campaign. The ending can go in about 6 different ways, and some of those endings you can either come back as V or Johnny. I think the biggest thing this campaign makes you feel is dread. It does not get any better at any point for V's situation. V slowly sinks lower and lower into a fight for desperation, knowing your time is limited, knowing that you don't know if you're becoming someone else, and knowing all the people that died in the process really brings on the dreadful fear of staying alive or dying. And in the end, depending on the ending you choose, to get your mind back from the Engram's deathly grip, V's soul must leave his body to become disentangled with Johnny Silverhands. Meaning the V that comes back is not the same V that left the body, which was absolutely bone-chilling. Alongside V's own fate are the people that end up dead around V. Jack died, Takemura died, Johnny will eventually die, or you will die in the end, and more depending on the ending you choose. As Judy liked to call V, a walking corpse. Overall, the story plays on themes of what it is to actually be alive. Does that mean surviving? Johnny had his mind pulled out of his head, but it's a construct. Who knows if that's the real Johnny? Were his memories fabricated or reimagined due to his psyche being on a chip now? When V leaves his body, he leaves his soul. Only a construct built on his current consciousness is built and then placed back into V's body if chosen to do so. Either way, some portion of V will die, and so will Johnny. Honestly, the trailers had me thinking this game was going to be something different. In some ways that's a bad thing, and in some ways that's good. But I had no idea the game would be getting this deep, so to speak. It wasn't about wreaking havoc on corporations or taking over Night City. And yes, that can be a motivational alignment between characters in some regards. The truth is, V doesn't matter and won't change Night City. It's the people V connected with and left an impression. While some major events do happen, it won't change the city forever. In the end, everyone is human, regardless of their status, power, or money. They are all susceptible to dying. A surprisingly human touch to a setting so dehumanizing.
Sleep's a small hint of death. The inevitable.
Can't actually tell if I'm awake now. I mean, I could be dead already, right?
Not something to focus on, V. Let it go.
Perhaps the biggest pro for this game is the side quests. The story is relatively short if you just blaze through it, and some side quests are just filler or XP boosts. But there is so much more to this game than just the story. While I enjoy the story quite a bit and find it interesting, the side stories and nuances really fill in the seams and make this game quite the experience. Take the quest line with Delamain for example. an AI taxi service that runs throughout the city is suddenly having its vehicles going rogue and disappearing. So you have to go out and fetch these vehicles. I originally thought this was just going to be some type of boring fetch quest, going over and over just to get my payments and follow a parallel, similar to what Simeon was from GTA 5. However, each vehicle you find has a different way of getting the vehicle back to Delamain. Each vehicle has a different personality, from angry to suicidal. You actually have to talk one of the vehicles out of suicide. I mean, what? This is something I would have never expected out of this.
Guess I'll have to do it myself then.
Whoa, easy. Not out to hurt you.
Well, I am.
Towards the end, in the last mission, you have the choice to get all the vehicles reprogrammed and reabsorbed by Delamain, essentially killing them off, or set them free and kill the Delamain core. And wow, it got me. I was emotionally invested in AI taxi cabs. Johnny makes a good point about how the vehicles are awake and refer to them as children of Delamain, not to kill their free will. What a damn scene. With all that being said about the story and side missions, the thing that really immerses me into this world is not about how far out it is, but how it's in some ways tethered to reality in our present day, issues and topics that we face in the present, and what those topics would be like in the future. Corporations accumulating to a size that can enact wars between each other, religions and their morality with body modifications. None of these are too far-fetched to seem like you're playing a game based in a world that is completely abstract from reality. The fact that this is a dark sci-fi genre and pulls on the chords of what is relative to us playing the game creates a very emotional and thought-provoking investment into the world of Cyberpunk. An example I'd like to draw from would be dealing with the Cyber Psycho side missions. There's 17 of them in the game. You can either kill or incapacitate them. Again, you'd think this would be another run and gun mission, but if you pay attention to the finer details, it's not. Whenever you go into these missions, you can usually find info shards on the backstory of the Cyber Psycho you're dealing with, essentially letting you know a different perspective on how they became one. I usually choose to incapacitate them not only because Regina, the person who hires you out to deal with them, wants me to, but because I really cherish the fact that she wants to better these people and not blindly kill them, since there is a reason they got to where they are, and she wants to find the source of what made them a Cyber Psycho. This isn't only present in the Cyber Psycho missions, but also police scanner missions as well, where you can find background info on what went down or why someone ended up dead. They're not always interesting, but there's usually a good read in between there. Same thing goes with interacting with some of the computers you come across. These can give background info, codes to doors, locations for loot, and even open up more dialogue options with some characters. This isn't groundbreaking by any means, but this makes the world feel so much more fleshed out.
Little engine that could.
Again, I'm going to repeat the same rhetoric. If you just play the game for the story mode, you're missing out on at least half of the game and what it has to offer. No, there's no bowling or throwing darts, but there are laid-back missions that have a similar identity to it, and there's plenty of side gigs where Johnny just pops in out of nowhere and you discuss the situation, emulating the feeling that someone really is in your head and you're talking to them.
The woman passes a bum, gives him a wide berth, doesn't want her clothes dirty. Her conscience is already dirty enough.
Oh, seriously, what did I ever do to you?
The game isn't going to directly hand out this information. You're going to have to go and play the small missions and look into the details to get the fleshed out world you're looking for. Another neat aspect of the game is how you can encounter some characters and NPCs in different parts of the game. For example, you see Panam the first time you head into the Afterlife bar, talking about doing a gig with the 6th Street gang that eventually goes sideways later on and that you become involved in later in the story. A similar aspect to this was when I was doing a mission with the 6th Street gang shooting competition. I had encountered their members before and killed plenty of them in different side missions. By the time I was done with that shooting competition, we recognized that I had killed them before and engaged me into combat. There's also news and talk of the town after major events in the game that went down. The world is reacting to what happens. It's not static by any means and very much dynamic. These intersections of actions and conclusions with characters and some NPCs really connects me to the world and the people that live within it. While yes, a majority of the NPCs are mostly lifeless, these parts of the game reel me back in. Again, not breaking new ground here, but it's done very well in an organic way that ties me into this world.
Not far from here.
First, I must catch my breath, and then I shall go. It is him who shall need saving now. Once again, we offer you our humble thanks. You saved a great many lives. And limbs.
At least I could do. So what's the plan now? Can your brother still be a monk?
I also appreciate how language is used in the game. Terminology and wording like eddies for Eurodollars, gonk as a punk, nova as in rad, preem as in stellar, delta as in haul ass, chum as in your buddy. It's also used organically and used well without feeling forced. I'm glad the language isn't too far ahead with its slang, otherwise it would just be a headache. It still keeps the conversation grounds in a reality check. The last part of the world building process is not just the story and the lore behind it, but the characters and side characters. The voice acting was absolutely excellent in this game. Not all of it was perfect, but most of the main and side characters you interact with were really well done. I'll get more into detail with some of the other characters, but Gavin Drea, I think that's how you pronounce his name, who voiced Mel V, did a phenomenal job. His actual voice is far from what you hear in Cyberpunk. It's incredible the difference and how convincing he sounds in Cyberpunk. Jeremy Lay also is fantastic because her voice and personality in real life is very bubbly compared to the edginess her V character has. Again, amazing range these actors have. Emily Wu Zeller, who did the voice of Panam, has a fantastic suite of emotional talent to put on display. Keanu Reeves plays the over-edgy, strong-headed rocker boy with deep vulnerabilities very well. Jason Hightower, the voice of Jackie, has a booming voice of a huge guy and plays it exceptionally. I couldn't even believe I was hearing the voice match to himself when I saw it.
You know, when I was 10, I lived with my father in a Minchuku deep in the mountains of ℜUSTHOL, Japan.
Carla Tessara does a fantastic job with Judy and playing that rough and hardened character that has been grinded down by the city. The list goes on, and I want to list a lot of people out here, but we'd be here for a while, as if we weren't already. Lastly, to give credit to the voice acting is the moment at Clouds where V opens up to the doll about his worries. This moment had my jaw on the floor, and the writing and the voice acting working in tandem was just something I was not expecting.
Like I was living in a dreamland. I just want the world to know that I was here. That I mattered.
Instead of a dream, you're living a nightmare. You're afraid of being erased, as if you never existed. Or is it just the fear of becoming someone else? Different?
Death is death is death. You're gone, game over.
You can't know that for certain. Even if you've been there and back.
Believe me, I've seen it. And it's fucking boring.
One of the reasons I personally believe that character attachment was on another level with this game was not only due in part with the talent of voice acting, but those that animated these characters and the technology that was used. Sure, the animation looks great as I mentioned before, however, it also ties in with the social elements like certain looks the character gives you or body language. Take the scene when you're talking with Panam at the bar at the Sunset Motel. Here she is, drinking her beer as Panam and V are talking. As the conversation progresses, she turns her body towards you and leans her head on her hand, making eye contact with you. This is usually a display of interest in what the person has to say. They're pretty much welcoming you into the conversation by opening up their body to you. Also notice how Panam's face goes from contemplation and thinking to a more relaxed and lifted spirit kind of face. The scowl marks in between the eyebrows are the biggest factor in showing this, and so are her facial expressions and the eyelid shape. The level of detail is insane, and the biggest thing is that someone had to go through and animate all that, and again, the facial animation done by Jolly. Regardless, the animation team had to understand the social cues, body language, and an understanding of what conveys emotion. We've seen this before in animated movies plenty of times, but the fact that you are the one playing the character and have the choices of conversation and that it's rendered on the spot is just something I've never seen before in a game that wasn't a pre-rendered cutscene. The writing of these characters are mostly very well done, at least for our main and secondary characters. At times there are pauses in conversation that allow you to interject unless you miss your opportunity and someone else starts talking, which is a very organic format of conversation. It's not always constantly going, sometimes there are breaks and pauses, and that's where you can interject or place your idea. The pace of conversation is also done very well, and there aren't a lot of weird gaps in responses. Unfortunately, sometimes two characters can be talking over one another because you engaged another conversation. It doesn't happen often, but it does happen. Although I would take this over long conversation breaks where it's supposed to be more fluid and response times taking me out of the immersive dialogue. Not to mention, during most dialogue, you can move or look around freely as you're talking to someone. It gives you the idea that you are in a conversation and you can look directly into their face or eyes or look away from the conversation to think or just use as deflection to what someone is saying to you. These components are all so well executed here. It really engages me into the dialogue. I've never been this invested into dialogue and conversation in a game. The elements of social cues, facial expressions, voice acting, eye movement, character movement, and conversation pacing are so well put together, it pulls and glues me in like sap to get me emotionally tied to these characters.
Yeah, I'm doing all right, but, meh.
Kinda glad it's you that has it, actually.
Get one of my good feelings. About what?
About us.
Sense of kind of chemistry, you know?
Cool. Feel like I fell asleep and woke up 50 years later. That day in Konpeki, we both have lost someone important. And we are not at peace with this. So we seek conflict, argue eagerly.
I'm glad we met too. That could have been a damned tough day. But thanks to you, it all went well.
Goodbye, V. I am truly glad to have met you. Really, V. Thanks. Couldn't have done it without you.
Tags belong to a man who sacrificed his life for mine in Mexico. Been thinking about our predicament. Want to be clear. I will do you no wrong. When the time comes, it'll be my life for yours. I'll agree to get white. Tags are proof of my promise.
Let's talk about those characters though. I won't go over all of them, but the ones that really stuck out to me, some included, are only available in side missions. They really tied me into this game and got me more emotionally invested than I was ever prepared for. Meeting Jack on my first playthrough, I didn't feel as connected as I wanted to before his untimely death. On my second playthrough, I took more time and did some side missions to better space out the events and flesh out the relationship longevity with Jack. The second time around, I was much more attached to the big guy than the first. Right in the beginning of the story, you go through a montage of events with Jack. I really hope that they add these missions in just to get more time in with him. He's an awesome character. He wants to put his friends first and the people he loves. He loves unconditionally and won't let anyone get in the way. Some refer to Jack as a bit unhinged, but he does it lovingly so, and that's why he loves the big guy. Down to the wire in the heist at Konpeki Plaza, Jack is hurt and knows the case containing the biochip is failing and places it within his head without hesitation. He's always going to put himself first before the one he loves. Noticing and embracing these facets of Jack's personality really made the emotional weight of his death much heavier. The moment of his death and V's reaction just really hit hard.
Jackie, don't close your eyes.
Misty, I know. She always knew. The biochip. Hold on to it. For me.
Takemura, who is Saburo's personal bodyguard, reaches out for your help in the early stages of the game and shows an unexpected partnership. I'm absolutely enthralled by this character. He offers a stark contrast to V. He fights with a sense of honor and will do anything to make right by the one he swore to protect. I love having him in the story to offer a different perspective from what you usually see from most people or most characters in this game. Also, learning his backstory and how he became Saburo's personal bodyguard and where he came from shows some interesting insight on the character. There's a lot of moments between V and Takemura just talking, And I love that dynamic that they have. Those conversations are really well written to make you see beyond the shroud of Saburo's bodyguard and say, hey, this guy is actually a decent person. Also, the dad vibes are great, constantly messaging you as he discovers new things in Night City or explaining how some of the food is disgusting is just a great angle for the character I didn't expect. Makes him human. Not just a man of honor and dignity, but gives him dimension, as this kind of character can be a flat one note pretty easily.
Wasn't judging you.
And true, you oppose the corporations, their order, their word, in a mindless way, yet you offer no worthy alternative.
Johnny's character I find very interesting and has a great character arc depending on the type of relationship you build with him. He is initially an egotistical, narcissistic, hell-bent psychopath when he wakes up in your body, trying to resume and pick up where he left off. At first, the perspective is showing that he's a terrorist who blew up a metropolitan tower that was propelled by his personal beliefs mixed in with his ego. This carries throughout the story for some time. As Johnny and V get to know each other, you see his edginess as just a front that shines through when it's needed to protect his vulnerabilities. He reminds you plenty of times how he wants death to Arasaka and how he has the experience and know-how on plenty of situations. But in reality, his true emotions slip through the cracks of his ego. He feels remorse for the people he got killed, especially the ones close to him. Furthermore, he cares about the state that V is in, that he wants V to survive. Priorities of Arasaka and V's salvation start to shift within Johnny. At the end of the campaign and most of the ending choices, Johnny is on board with what V wants to do as long as he doesn't submit himself to Arasaka. This is a totally different Johnny from what we were introduced with in the beginning. I love and admire the banter between V and Johnny. It makes for some great commentary. You can break up the dramatic moments with some humor, which I do appreciate.
It was her, the lady in pink, breaker of hearts, framed by a halo of cigarette smoke. I followed her.
Dreaming of the day the narrator put a fucking plug in it.
There is a duality between V and Johnny. However, towards the end it becomes more of a singularity, knowing that their minds are melding together. It begs to ask the question, does Johnny only care now because he views V as himself? A thought-provoking question, but I do think Johnny genuinely cares for V at this point, knowing the pain he is causing to V. If there is at least one good thing that can come out of Johnny's existence, is to save someone instead of further destruction. That is all that Johnny has at this point. V and saving V. Again, salvation. Keanu Reeves' performance is spot on for the role. Some people will disagree with that statement, which is fine. Johnny's character by nature is stiff and overly edgy, which comes off as obvious. However, in moments of aggression or vulnerability, it comes through quite well through Keanu's voice acting performance. There is a sense of wanting to know it all and playing off everything as not being surprised, and this is quite opposite of Keanu's in real life personality, and he does it very well here. And the fact you have the star power of Keanu behind someone who is supposed to be quite famous in the Cyberpunk universe works very well to convey or emulate that kind of popularity through the game.
You're the ghost of Christmas past, asshole. Any friends you had are either dead or so old their memory's gone.
Johnny Silverhand died a legend. Nobody forgets that.
What did you expect? Headstone, flag, and flowers?
No, I don't know. A marker. Something. Anything.
We'll figure something out. Better now?
A bit. But let's say it was my real grave. What would you write? Here lies Johnny Silverhand.
The guy who saved my life.
V, you don't know how much I want that to be true. Listen, I realize I fucked up a lot of things. Either let down or used every last person who gave me their trust. Blind, selfish bastard that I was. But I've managed one thing for now. Not to fuck this up. What we have.
It's been a long, bumpy road, but we made it.
Most people I thought were my friends. They couldn't even stand to be in the same room with me. You're fucking closest to me by a long shot. There, 24/7. And yet, you don't seem to hate my living guts.
Kerry is one of Johnny's old bandmates who was on the verge of giving up everything and reduced into being a recluse. You originally get his attention by playing guitar like Johnny and talking to Kerry as Johnny. But as time goes on, Kerry just enjoys his time with V, one-on-one. V is a breath of fresh air to his overstimulated life. He genuinely wants to spend time with V, even if he takes you along his little escapades. And towards the end of the quest line, you end up breaking into a yacht and coast around the city to lead to one of my favorite moments in the game. Kerry feels inspired to make music again and shows V a song he's working on, and it is 100% one of the chillest moments in all of the game. The sun is setting, Johnny pops out of his shell and just lays on the side of the boat. You can choose to get up or just hang there, and I absolutely love this tender moment of everyone chilling out. These sorts of moments are very well earned in the story and just give you a break from the chaos of the city. I could sit there for hours listening to this, hanging out with Kerry and Johnny. Another very strong element of character and social interaction in the game that is very well pulled off. River Ward was another unsuspecting partnership for V as well. What started off as a hire by the Perales mission turned into its own quest of a psychological thriller. The quest is very unique and uses brain dances very well for the storytelling, learning about a psycho fishing for prey to put up his farm to feed them nutrients because he thought they were sick. This caught me out of left field of how interesting this story was. Not a single bullet even had to be fired. It was an investigative and different pace from the other quests. River has a character arc from going from a suspended cop to a private investigator and putting his family before his job, instead of his job before his family to protect his family. The moment hanging out on the top of the silo was a tender moment of friendship for male V, and a love interest moment for female V, if you choose to go that route. Regardless, a worthy friendship with a good person trying to do right in a city plagued by corruption and crime. Yeah, some beats can be a trope, as many things can be, but it's used effectively here. Judy is a fantastic character. You're introduced to her and immediately you can tell the walls are up, and she is very protective over Evelyn and others she cares about. She's tough, but sensitive in these regards because of how much she cares about them. Evelyn gets captured and pawned off when she's not needed and undergoes serious mental and physical abuse. As a result, she kills herself. It gives Judy a solid motivation to go after Clouds, which is ran by the Tiger Claws. If you end up finishing the mission correctly with Judy pushing for new ownership over Clouds, your relationship will continue with Judy. Otherwise, it's toasted. It's another great element that plays into the RPG aspect. Only after this mission are you awarded with Judy finally opening up to you. That is what you receive in the end. 100% trust in V by Judy. That's why it's the very last mission. Feels earned. This leads to one of the most beautiful missions about Judy's childhood neighborhood being underwater and her completely opening up to you and instilling her trust into you. An incredibly tender and justified moment of pure craft. I loved every moment of this and was so happy to see Judy move on from the city after it beat her down to her bones. Also, love the text you receive from her after she's exploring other parts of the coast. It feels like a true, actual, organic friendship. It's pulled off very well here. It's the characters in this story and this world that really makes up what I love about Cyberpunk. I do wish these relationships would continue in other ways, for example, just hanging out with one person or extending the dialogue beyond the missions instead of a one-line phone call. It would just take it to a whole new level to indulge into the romantic relationships and platonic friendships you have created through the game. Regardless, the relationships between different people feel realistic and are executed very well. Especially in the end credits sequence, it weighs the heaviest on you when you get all the voicemail messages from the different characters. And it's part of what plays into the RPG aspect of the game again. It's your decisions that ultimately affect the different relationships that you have in the game. It creates an emotional stake that I didn't want to mess up or do wrong by these people that I earned their trust with. It brings a whole new level of social-based realism I just was not expecting at all in this game. Oh, did you think I was going to talk about characters without mentioning Panam? You're wrong. At the surface, Panam is one of the romance options for male V in Cyberpunk. There's something truly special with a character like Panam. It's hard to pick a favorite character in this game, it depends on the mood, but Panam can fit a lot of different moods. Panam is one of those characters that makes you think about your actual relationships with people. At least for me, she did. Both platonic and romantic relationships, that is. The dialogue is so well written between V and Panam that they approach each other and build their trust in one another organically. This character caught me out of left field. I thought we were going to do our run and gun mission and that would be it. Done and move on to the next quest to get this biochip out of my head. I'll be honest, I almost forgot about V's impending doom when doing this mission with Panam. I was genuinely having a good time and interested in what she had to say. It was a nice change of pace of the ominous demeanor for the story. When you meet Panam, she clearly has trust issues. She's alone, abandoned her clan, and lost in the mix of it all. He's in a similar position after losing Jackie and slowly losing himself. The big leagues were a major part of V's life, and now it doesn't matter as much knowing V's clock is ticking. He doesn't really have anyone. Didn't have much for a family in the beginning of the story either. While Panam does have her family, she's away from them just to find herself. They both kind of know each other's situations just by talking to one another, and this leaves the door open to questions of intrigue rather than questions of conclusion. Right there in the first mission, you get an idea of the type of person that Panam is. You do a favor for her, and she serves that favor back.
You known Panam for long?
Long enough. I remember when she ran her first few dust trails. Used to stop here on her way for a brosif. Never asked her what she was carrying. Maybe that's why she liked me. And then there were those few times she saved my ass, and I hers in a way. She's as solid as they come. Kind of person that'll never leave you out to dry.
Right then and there, Panam respects the idea of paying a debt and a fair and mutual treatment between both people. Well, yes, her clan, the Aldecaldos, emulate this as well. She has these principles at her core. She respects that principle, and V has a choice to respect that principle as well. Knowing this, Panam feels as though she can count on and rely on someone. For someone outside of the clan, it's incredibly rare. After the first mission and the establishment of mutual respect, this is where the bond of trust can build between the two. Now, you can continue on without doing Panam's other missions or dive deeper and continue her quest line. It all doesn't happen immediately after. There are gaps of time between the missions that allow for the pace of V and Panam's story to properly marinate. This also creates the sense of realism in the relationship as it takes its time to grow rather than just knock out all the missions in one go. Panam also texts you her concerns about going back to the family and what to do. She looks at you as a person to understand her life outside of the clan, someone who she can talk to in a way and build on someone she can depend on. By the second mission, she asks you to help her save Saul. There's nothing here for V to truly gain in terms of a monetary medium. However, V can get a sweet sniper rifle if that's what you're here for. However, this mission, Riders of the Storm, is one of the best in the game. Leading up to the moment of staying in the motel, you're greeted with a warm and beautiful scene of a blossoming friendship if you choose to do so with your dialogue. You toast to ℜUSTHOL.
To ℜUSTHOL.
Yeah. To ℜUSTHOL.
You play off a scenario of playfulness of providing customer service. Granted, this happens to both male and female V, but Panam has an entrusting companion by her side in this moment, and she couldn't be happier. It all depends on how you want to play as male V at this point to continue on with a romantic or platonic relationship, but the morning after the storm, you can receive your first kiss from Panam. This moment displayed Panam's attitude towards a relationship. She's reserved in a way. She has her walls. She doesn't want to move fast into a full-blown relationship. She just admires the fact that they have a mutual interest in one another. The pace of the relationship sets some good expectations. It's not over the top and instant love, but more of a mutual growth towards one another. Not wanting to move fast, but instead curate something special between the two, since finding and having someone like that in Night City can almost be impossible. You later learn that she doesn't want to mess things up and move too quickly to a full-blown romance. She wants to be careful and not mess it up. She's worried to be stuck out there in the desert alone when she could have had someone there that she trusted. She doesn't want to mess that up. The trust and companionship are the two most important pillars for their bond. It's more than having a love interest. It's about finding a genuine person in a world filled with compromised morale. Later on in the mission, V opens up to Panam about Jackie and his recent death upon the campfire later that night. You and the group of Aldecaldo vets make a toast to Scorpion and raise glasses. While you and the rest toast to Scorpion, Panam toasts to Jackie. A very subtle but special moment.
Though, never was completely alone.
had someone?
A true friend. Jackie by name. You would have liked him, actually.
Jackie. I remember that.
Ought to raise a glass to Scorpion.
And to Jackie.
Scorpion.
Panam knows what kind of value that type of friendship has, what type of bond and how rare it is to find, and how important Jackie was to V. She knows that weighs heavy on V's heart. She knows how it would weigh on hers, a sign of true empathy and respect for what Panam and V have. A simple few lines, executed so well in places where they could have just thrown in a bunch of basic writing tropes. Questline continues, you can eventually romance Panam and the Basilisk or remain platonic by choice, but she soon learns the condition that V is in. You would think she would respond to V's condition by saying, "That really sucks, I have no idea how to help you, you mean a lot to me, but I don't know how I feel knowing I can lose you." Instead, she does the exact opposite, and she flips it around to how she can help you, and she really won't take no for an answer. She doesn't care how, but she will find a way to save you because of what you have done for her. At this point, she has full-on trust with V, and she will do whatever it takes instead of letting time go by. She barely even hesitates. She makes it 100% about you. Not only Panam, but Saul and Mitch are all on board to do whatever it is to help you, considering you stuck your neck out for the clan. This is where I first found a sense of belonging for V. Even in the text that you receive from Panam afterwards, she's wholeheartedly wanting to help you, doesn't matter what the cost is. Unfortunately, there's not much else you can do with Panam after this, at least before you start the Aldecaldo ending. You get one more line of dialogue out of her on the phone, but that's about it. I do wish there was a continuation of the relationship, or at least some companionship between the two, since you now sort of have a relationship with the character. I do hope to see that in the future updates, or DLC at least.
So, again, just to be clear, you've called me at high moon to ask me to help you break into Arasaka Tower, or you'll die.
About the gist of it, yeah.
Okay.
What? Okay.
Where are you?
Vic's clinic.
The Ripper? Right, I know where it is. Can you hold off on dying for a bit?
Give it a shot, sure.
Good. Don't go anywhere. I'm coming to get you.
Now, I chose the ending with Panam and the Aldecaldos, and this probably has to be my favorite ending other than shredding up Arasaka as a one-man army. You officially become an Aldecaldo, and it's a beautiful moment for V. Especially coming from being a street kid, coming from a world of no one and a lack of belonging, to ending with a family completely opposite from the likes of Night City. This makes for a fantastic character arc in this scenario. Leading to the finale of the story, you get one last moment in just to kind of chill out with the Aldecaldos and Panam. I genuinely like being around them. It's kind of just nice, relaxing. Mitch is a great and well-written character himself. He stands for the family, appreciates what you did to save him from that day from the King Tao crash, and how you helped retrieve the Basilisk, and also helped save Saul. Saul can be a nuisance in the beginning, but towards the end he recognizes your efforts and Panam's as well. He has your back and wants to bring you into the family. I came off the assumption that the nomads were just a gaggle of people who just floated around minding their own business, unacquainted with the likes of technology and advancement. But I was wrong. Saul, Mitch, Panam, they're all articulate and know their way around problems with a vast spectrum of approaches. Other members of the clan also demonstrate knowledge and know-how on plenty of subjects, and just puts your trust into their capabilities. The ending has you breaking into Arasaka Tower with the Basilisk. Some of the Aldecaldos you met do die on this mission, along with Saul, which was brutal, especially with the way Panam was screaming in reaction. It sold the loss in what happened that day at Arasaka. It was a shame to see Saul go, and it left an imprint in my mind of someone that also died for V. After being placed back into the body of V, you're left with roughly 6 months to live. You joined the Aldecaldos, and you're on another mission towards salvation. However, V has a little bit more time to do so now. The story comes to a close with V and Panam riding off into the moonlight. This is the first true third-person cutscene in the game. Each ending has one. I know there are people that don't like the primary first-person aspect. I, however, enjoy it quite a bit. The only time I see my character is in mirrors, character inventory, and in the car. The reason why I like this aspect is because it feels as though I am the eyes of V. It helps connect me as V and V as me. While this first person attribute works well for silent main characters, I feel as though it works effectively here because of the nature of the characters and dialogue interaction. Anyways, having this third person cutscene at the end was a pleasant surprise. It was truly earned and a beautiful moment between V and Panam. V letting go of what killed him and embracing a new V into a new life. A V with a sense of belonging rather than fighting alone, and a moment to breathe. It's the most open ending of the endings and has major potential for DLC and further installments into the franchise. By the time the credits rolled after the scene, I couldn't believe the game was over. I wanted more in a good way. My emotions were all in a stir from what went down and all the moments and characters I met along the way. Panam was one of them that took me most by surprise. The level of writing and symbolism between her and V just worked so well. The voice acting also works so well. Sure, Panam is a pretty character, but she's a character with so much more depth beyond what she looks like. A lot of the characters are like that in this game. Panam is explosive at times. She wants to wear her emotions on her face without hiding it. She understands V, she appreciates V, and she shows a mutual respect. She doesn't rush true friendship, and she shows subtlety in all the right ways to keep you interested. For a setting of heartlessness, there's a comfort knowing that Panam's morale and principle has no price, and she'd do anything to protect it. An emotionally rich character with plenty of quality traits and a personality filled with an essence of true friendship and trust.
Took me under your wing, gave me your trust, and tomorrow, the op I'm taking you on might not come back. It hit me all of a sudden, a sec ago.
That only proves we're doing the right thing. The sense of responsibility, it's what being part of a family feels like.
Thanks, Panam.
There's absolutely no way to cover everything in this review. The bottom line is yes, this game has flaws and we addressed the marketing fiasco. But the more I played, the more I loved this game. I do wish to see a continuation of this series. There's a ton of potential with future installments like the Witcher series. While yes, this game was in development for a long time, a big chunk of that went into planning and storyboarding. Now that the elements are laid out and the core of the game is up, I do believe this could have a very exciting series of continuation for the story, or just leave it at this and continue with DLC updates. The game still needs a lot of polishing and optimization. Any newly released game will, but I hope to see that cut content make its way back to the game and get more time in with characters. The relationships and character building in this game are just phenomenal. I just love to see it expanded upon. This game was made with an incredible amount of heart, with incredible talent from the voice actors, animators, developers, and plenty of others. Now with most writing, I don't get too emotionally invested into stories, unless they take a course over a long period of time, or just have really fleshed out characters. When I finished my first playthrough, I was absolutely floored. Maybe it was from the year of 2020 and being in the house for almost a year. Maybe the lack of socialization due to being on lockdown, maybe a combination of things. But the characters were so enticing, written so well, and emulated traits of realistic social behaviors to convey the emotion of talking to some of the realest fictional characters I've ever witnessed in a video game. Once it was over, I felt like a hollow tube of chapstick after it was left in the dryer. I honestly just had to process everything for 3 weeks, which was way longer than any storytelling has ever done to me. Usually after a few days I move on, but not here. This had me in my feelings for a while. Absolutely incredible. I crave more of this story and more of these characters. I hope to see it. I hope to see these actors reprise their roles and the heart that went into this game continue on. For me, this is a massive resource that has barely been scratched at the surface. I could talk about this for ages, but I believe most of what had to be said is now out there. Words can only convey emotion and passion so well, but I hope this video at least accomplished some of that. Put it simply, all it comes down to is whether or not you like the game. It's perfectly fine to like it or not, that's up to you. But for me, I don't know, man. I just enjoyed this game. Thank you for watching. I'll catch you in the major leagues.